Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the South Coast Insider. And things being what they are, this is the first time that we're back into the studio. And it's actually kind of weird to see how everything was just left the way it was. It's almost like coming back to your summer home. That's the good part.
Like a dusty old museum.
Like a dusty old museum, exactly. And every guest is special, but this one especially so because this guest is my partner in crime, and I'm assuming I'm his partner in crime. And I'm going to let him introduce himself as I do everyone that's on the podcast. And with that,
what's up, everybody? I'm Jeff Wotton. I'm the co-founder of the South Coast Artist Index podcast and co-founder of Spectrum Marketing Group, which is where we're recording this today.
How do you spell your name, Jeff?
Jeffrey, Jeffrey, in case my wife is listening, because after 12 years, she still gets that wrong sometimes. And last name is Wotton, Wotton.
So she transposes the E and the R, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it goes ERY. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't. I'm laughing, but I shouldn't because I still do stupid things.
12 years later, she's still doing it. She'll ask.
Yeah.
ERY, REY.
So, when we first met, it was actually all kind of serendipitous. We met at the AU Shri. That was a client of mine, and you were doing something with was it Food Week or Dine Out Week or what was it called?
I can't remember at that time. Is that where we first met?
Yeah, Restaurant Week.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And Mitra, who was the manager, wanted me to vet you, so to speak, and that's when I met you. And I don't even know how the heck we got into the conversation, but one thing led to another, and two things happened. One of them, you asked your dad if I could join the crew here, and then we came up with this idea. And I always would like to say that it was kind of weird, in a way, for lack of a better word, that you went to business school and wanted to be an artist, and I went to art school and ended up teaching in business school.
Well, technically, I didn't go to business school.
Okay.
No, yeah, my degree is actually a social sciences degree, so liberal arts major.
Oh, really? I always thought it was business for some weird reason.
No. At this point, I wish it was. Well, I don't know. Maybe not, but yeah, no, social sciences.
Well, they taught you well. You're running a veritable little empire here.
Life taught me well,
Yeah.
So
I like to think I had a little bit to do with that. I would say you were my best student.
A big bit to do with that, yeah, for sure. No, we learned a lot from you, definitely.
How did you see all of this evolving?
How did I see it evolving?
Yeah.
Hey. At first, I really didn't see it evolving. It took a while to see or to have a real vision. It was more just kind of, in terms of the business, it was more like of a side project type thing at first. So I moved back to the East Coast here. Well, I wasn't really planning on moving back, just came back to the East Coast to hang out here for a little while and figure out what was next. And then, one thing led to another, but there was no real vision at that point. So
you had been living in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, so San Francisco prior to moving back to Massachusetts, and before San Francisco, I lived in New Hampshire. So,
yeah. And there is that old saying. I think it's a Chinese saying that success has nothing to do with luck. It's all about timing. I think you really came into the marketplace just at the right time.
Yeah, well, I think we hit our stride at the right time. we came into the marketplace at a pretty bad time. It was like
I was struggling
the
on the
worst
beer.
economy since
And that's
the
why
Great
we had
Depression.
Yeah, that's why we had all the time in the world for what was originally the South Coast Artist Profiles.
Yeah. So, yeah, in retrospect, it wasn't a great time. And it was shortly after I found out I was going to be a father. So, wasn't the best time to go and just start a business on a whim, so to speak. But it's all worked out, so.
I think it was Man Ray, the artist, who said there is no such thing as the good time or the best time. There's only the time.
Yeah,
So,
and timing. So we started the South Coast Artist Index. Geez, I don't even know how long ago it was. We started talking about that idea.
I think we started that idea back in somewhere just before, maybe 2011. And the problem we had with it was technology. This didn't exist.
Well, that's what I was going to say with timing. So we started, we stopped, we started, and then, you kind of had the vision of what you wanted it to be. You wanted to document, artists from the area. Some kind of, place people could go and learn more about people from this area, from various disciplines. And, so it was going to be a website. We were going to interview people, write bios. Then it was going to be like a profile thing. They could sign up and they could create their profiles and populate it. So there was challenges with getting artists to do that and whatnot. And then, podcasts really started to explode. And, you were always running in like different directions, different ideas, this, that, and the other thing. And it was always tough to get you to focus, channel that energy into one stream, to kind of get it going. And then we talked about the podcast thing, and I just thought it was the perfect format for you to just be able to close the door, tune everything else out, sit down with an artist from the community and get to know them, so the listeners can get to know them and people from the area can get to know them. And not to say that, some of the other stuff won't still come to fruition in terms of the articles and the profiles and spotlight videos and things like that. But, the podcast forum is, it's a low barrier to entry. It's pretty easy to do. It doesn't cost a lot of money. And ultimately, I think it's, I don't want to say the best way, but one of the best ways people can get to know artists from the area.
Yeah, and on that note, let me tell you, I have had the privilege of interviewing over 70 artists. And I'm just scratched the surface. That's what frustrates the heck out of me, is that I wish I could do more. And I remember when you told me that I was going to be doing podcasts. It's like, okay, there's an old advertising joke about, or show business joke about, having a face for radio. That meant, you weren't that. I said I may have a face for radio, but I definitely don't have the voice for radio. I still don't, but. I had no agenda. I had no formula. It's funny because a lot of the guests that I invite, they're like very, very timid and very, what are you going to ask me? And, all these other things. It's like, it's just a conversation. That's all it is. I have no idea where it's going to go. And I learned very quickly, I ended up with a lot of cliches. This is not a one and done. You're not just one page in this book that we're writing. You're a couple of pages. You could be a chapter, and the connectivity, which is one of the things that I saw from early on, is still there. It's amazing the connectiveness of people in this community to one another. It's almost like genealogy. And a lot of that connectivity is through institutions, through schools. And of course, then there's a phenomena that we have here is the Swain School of Design, which really set us apart from other cities to have had an institution of that sort around here. Now, you yourself are an artist. I mean, I've seen your work. It's really nice stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would call myself an artist at this point, just because of the lack of time I spend in the discipline, but I come from an artistic background, yeah. So when I was young, I loved to draw. Probably one of my first kind of ambitions, wasn't super ambitious, but, at some point was like, I'd love to be an animator. I loved watching cartoons as a kid, Looney Tunes, Hanna-Barbera, anything from Chuck Jones, just grew up on that stuff and loved it. And then I remembered going down to, was it Universal Studios or in Orlando, Disney somewhere, where you could see the behind-the-scenes stuff. And at that time, they were switching over to a lot of like computer-based stuff and digital. Well, I don't know if you'd call it digital at that point, but they were moving away from the traditional way that they did it. Yeah. And then I was kind of dissuaded. I was like, I don't want to do that. I just want to draw, So it was always, a hobby. And then in high school, it became kind of a passion. And it's funny, I was thinking about this the other day because I was talking to my daughter about how they're not getting art education in school now because of COVID and how they've had to restrict things and whatnot. And thinking back to high school, and, school was just never like the thing for me. But, I think the art classes in high school kind of got me through. In particular, one of my teachers there, Mrs. Irwin, kind of gave me motivation to get up and actually get to school each day. Because otherwise, I'm not so sure I would have even made it through.
What school system did you go through?
Dartmouth High.
Dartmouth
at that
High.
Point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I did pretty well. I loved it. And, I got into different art programs and had different shows, like won some awards and got into a couple art schools when applying for college, but ultimately decided that I didn't want to go to school for art. I figured it would just be a hobby. And so it's pretty much just been a hobby ever since.
Yeah. The combination of running Spectrum Marketing Group, which is a marketing and advertising agency, and the combination of the Artist Index or the South Coast Artist Index is kind of unique because it kind of one supports the other. And one of the biggest stumbling blocks still is the database. To try to find the right platform, and I've tried, and I purchased one for us. I reviewed it, and my nephew, who is a programmer, he works with like huge clients. And he looked at the last program, app that I bought for membership. And he's like, I don't understand this. So, so obviously it wasn't just me, but the idea of doing the podcast is very, very important. Transcribing them, that's what we're going to be doing next, is transcribing them. Hopefully we can take those transcriptions, get them edited, what's the word? Get them edited as they were presented, and then have them re-edited by someone with an overarching theme that they can pull all this information and create a story. And I'd love to be able to see an ebook, which hopefully would eventually turn into a print book, called The First 50, The First 50 Podcasts. And then the second batch would be the second 50, and so on and so forth as we go on down the line. And the purpose of it all is still to the original concept that we had, that, the elevator pitch was, so what's this artist profile, as it was originally called. And I said, well, Jeff and I are building a pyramid. And they would look at me like, what are you talking about? I said, well, they didn't build pyramids to hold a skinny little body in there. They built a pyramid to preserve memories. And that's, what this program or this project is all about, is to preserve memories. Because all these artists that I've interviewed, and I already had one situation with Dan Logan where he passed away. Had I not interviewed him, and it was so much more. I was going to get Dan on the show because he was multi-talented. He was a photographer and a writer, a published writer. Didn't get that chance to get back to him on that. So how do you feel about what we're doing? What are you and I leaving behind? Now, of course, you're going to be around after I'm gone, because of the
Hopefully
difference in our ages.
Hopefully a few more years after you're gone.
Well, if
A handful, anyways.
if I'm like my mom, I might be around until you get to be my age.
So you could be bugging me for another 20 years.
Another
is that
20
what you're
years at
saying?
least. Yeah. Actually, with mom, she's going to be 95 this year.
Yeah.
And she's still a threat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the ultimate goal, and obviously, our time and our resources right now are limited, but the ultimate goal is to leave that legacy for artists in the area. So, obviously in today's day and age, I think it's going to be a multifaceted approach, and we're not going to get to everybody. We're not going to be able to cover everyone. But the podcast is going to be a great forum, Speaking of Dan, people can go back and listen to that, right? And, that conversation probably has so much more meaning to you now than it did at that time, and I'm sure it does to his friends and family. They can go back and tune into that. Same thing with what we want to do on the website and creating profiles. So we got a biography, images of their work and stuff like that. Of course, the other forum that we want to do is video, creating bio type videos on these artists to interview them, get to know them, and showcase their work. And then ultimately something in print would be great as well. But, like you said, it's about creating that legacy, a forum or a platform where there's going to be multiple avenues for people to go and explore these people, who they were, what they did, what their impact was, what their type of work was, all that stuff. So it's going to entail a lot of work, but like you said, ultimately that's what it is. It's having one place where people can create or pass down a legacy, and people can go and find information about these people.
Yeah, I mean, in 20 years' time, for example, just to pull a number out of the air, to go back and listen to one of these artists on their way up. Fitzcarmel Lemaire, for example. Imagine in 20 years' time to listen to his, the first podcast that he did. Or in this particular case, as we're recording now, Earl Lee White, who shortly after I did the podcast with him, was called away to New Orleans. There was an opportunity down there. And this Sunday, which was February 28th, I think it was, he was on CBS's NCIS New Orleans.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And I've told him, and I'm going to say it out loud again, I believe that when we see him in a huge role, it's going to be him portraying Malcolm X. And that's kind of a really cool thing when you stop and think about having this opportunity, not ability, but opportunity to see people coming in and coming up, and then also to see people in their prime.
Yeah.
And then to see them not on their way down, but at the end of their, I'm up there in age.
The swan song. Yeah, it's interesting because I hadn't really thought about it like that, because initially when we started it and talked about it, you had used your mother as an example, and we were thinking more about people who were getting older or people who have passed away and being able to capture that legacy. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to think about it from the other side and catching people on the way up.
Yeah.
And then being able to come back, 5, 10, 15 years down the road and see where they were then.
Yeah. I still haven't been able to get somebody, and I've tried, to get somebody on the show to talk about someone who's passed. And all those recollections are very, very, very important. And then, the best example is my mother. I mean, yes, she's still alive, but had I not memorialized her in an article, then when I leave the planet, it's over for her for the second time. There's an African proverb that says, when the last person speaks your name, you die the second time. you know.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about it like that, because we certainly have the technology nowadays to create that legacy where people can go back and find information. You know, in addition to the art and illustration, I'm also a guitarist, so I'm really into music as well. And sometimes I go down the rabbit hole and going back and back and back, particularly a lot of times in blues music, and you hear a lot of people talking about certain artists, or you read about certain artists, you know, let's say pre-1940s, you go back 30s, 20s, even earlier, you know, you hear these people talking about these artists, and you really can't find, you know, much in the way of, you know, in this case, audio of them performing. Mm-hmm. So all you have is like these other second-hand, third-hand accounts of these artists who inspired all these other artists.
Covers of covers. Yeah.
And it's like, as much as I search, I can't hear an actual song from that person because the technology just, you know, didn't exist at that point, or they weren't in the position to, you know, be recorded in that era. So, yeah. Now there's no excuse, you know. We should have some record of everybody.
Yeah, it's the preservation of memory. That's the most important. And Gene Blaisdell, who I've had the honor to speak with on the phone, it was the inspiration for this. I cut out that ad that she had in the Bowsprit magazine back in the 80s, late 80s actually, when she was looking. She had a list of 125. Just because we're in a studio, this ambient sound is like no different than your dog barking when you do a Zoom one. He just opened a beer, by the way. But you know, I spoke with her.
A well-designed beer.
Yeah, exactly. This was Paula and I's first collaboration, I think. Quick
on the
Eternity.
Illustration on that.
Yeah,
one?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, we did a series of those.
Yeah, my wife Paula is the graphic designer here, and that's a whole other story. But our first collaboration was for Moby Dick Brewing on one of their first beer labels. But the you know, when I spoke with Mary Jean and told her that you know, she had those 125 names and she had a plea, a birthday, anything, something, just, you know, she needed something because she had this list of suspected artists, but it was kind of awful that there was nothing else. So between getting people to give up information, I mean, I think she had it from 1749, it went up to 1949 in her book. And when I spoke with her, she said, you know, I stopped at 1949. I'd love
1749.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because about around that time, a lot of the artists that were anybody left the United States and went back to England because they couldn't make a living here. It was that tough. You know, still very raw, you know, the society here. And in this particular area, it was amazing the amount of artists that we had that made national, international, you know, had national and international acclaim. And she stopped in 1949, and when I spoke with her on the phone, she said, you know, I'd love to be able to pick it up again and bring it right up to the present, to where you are. She said, and to digitize the work that I did and have that put into this database. So now we would have this you know, record that goes from the very, very earliest beginnings that we can find to as present as, you know, the day that we're speaking. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really, well, first of all, it was phenomenal that she felt that way.
And how is her database maintained?
It's through the Whaling Museum, because she was the former art curator for the Whaling Museum. Mm. And so they have all that information in their archives, but it has to be digitized now, because, you know, the Whaling Museum has expanded beyond what I'm sure your fourth grade field trip and my fourth grade field trip were pretty much the same field trip, and they've expanded and they've diversified and they've, you know, been inclusive, and I mean, it's a phenomenal organization.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place.
Yeah, it is, and to do that strictly with the artists would be fantastic, because I mean, New Bedford's creative community goes beyond Albert Pinkham Ryder, Albert Bierstadt, and right up to the very present, John Havens Thornton, was, probably one of the more recent well-known artists that came out of this area. And that's just in the visual arts. We haven't even spoken about the performing or literary arts as of yet.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to it.
So it is a huge...
It's a big undertaking.
Yeah, it's like digging out from the blizzard of 78.
Are you ready for it?
I was just going to ask you the
Good
same
thing you got
question.
another 20 years in you.
Yeah. So one of the I don't know what kind of feedback have you gotten from the show?
So I've actually gotten tremendous feedback. Yeah. I've looked at the data and the analytics some here and there. I haven't had much time to really dedicate to it too much. But I've turned
you're
on.
busy running an empire.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you call it that.
Yeah.
But the number of people that I've turned on to it and that I'm still in communication with, I hear great things from, and it's a diverse group of people too. Like some younger people. And they really enjoy it. Yeah, I think it's a good forum, and it's the perfect forum for you. It just it works for a lot of people. So the feedback has been great. The numbers have been good. I think we need to put a little bit more time into it and kind of expand the audience a little bit. And partly that's my fault, just because I haven't had the time to devote to it. And also, obviously, I think just right about the time we were hitting our stride in terms of getting in a groove with the show and a production schedule and editing and all that is when COVID hit. So then, to all the listeners out there that are still following along, I apologize for all the poor audio via Zoom and Skype podcast.
Yeah, Jim Charette especially. Oh my God!
So that's
like 4 times to get him squared away.
So that's been a challenge, but thankful that so many people have still tuned in every week and supported it, and thankful to you to have continued it, because it would have been easy to just say, hey, we'll hit pause on this for a little bit. Not only do we have the COVID challenge, but you have all your other life challenges, and then for us, the challenge was kind of inverted. Business really just kind of exploded. We got so busy because of COVID.
Yeah.
I didn't get to do a lot of things I wanted to do. We could have set you up with a better home studio. We could have made portable kits. We could have got to, the guest so they would have a better sound quality if they're Zooming from their house or whatever. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
We've made it through, and I think the feedback has been tremendous. Yeah.
I've been getting things like thankfulness. Oh my God, this is so great that you're doing this. I want you to really know that I appreciate it. And it's like, wow, thank you. Not looking for those accolades or attaboys or anything, but I'm going to tell you, it's what makes it difficult accepting that praise is I really consider myself the luckiest guy in the area that I've actually had these one-on-one conversations with over 70 artists. I've learned so much.
What better way to learn? I mean, especially for you as an artist yourself. So it's not like you're just coming at it from an interviewer's perspective. Right. It's you get to pick the brains of all these people.
Right.
Before the show, during the show, and after the recording, and that's got to be a masterclass in and of itself.
I mean, I know that a good share of the interviews were with people my age or close to my age, and I've been blessed with a memory ever since I was a kid. So I was able to put people at ease and then ask them questions and make connections and verify things that I remembered or didn't remember correctly. And then my biggest fear was, oh my God, I got a kid on a show. How am I going to connect with them? And basically, I don't even think about that anymore. It's whoever is, slotted for the Zoom podcast. and I don't even look in their backgrounds or anything. I just have a conversation with them, and it really has been a wonderful thing. I mean, probably one of the best podcasts I've had. Unfortunately, the audio quality was crappy. Was with Don Wilkinson, whom I've known since I came out, as I used to like to say when I
the first one or the recent one.
The recent one. I use that term "came out" because I was buried in advertising for a long time, and then decided not too long after I met you to stop painting again, and there was always that thing in the air from friends.
How long did you stop for?
Officially, I officially stopped probably 20 years, maybe. And what I say by officially is that I had spurts in and out kind of thing.
Okay, all right. You didn't go cold turkey.
No. Overall, I mean, basically it was a 40-year hiatus, of full time, because that's what I wanted to do. And there was one particular review that Don did for a show that I had at the Colo Colo at the original location in Center Street, and people was like, "Wow, I thought Don was your buddy. Thought he was your pal." It's like, it wasn't a bad interview. He described my work exactly as it is. So I had this really great opportunity to speak with Don again. He was a return guest, and then I asked him to interview me, to turn the tables, because I thought he would be like the best guy to do that, because he, from my history in the arts going back. And it was great on so many levels. And there was also the friendship was there. The solidity of the friendship was there. He has a difficult job reviewing people's work. I remember once asking him, what happens when you walk into a gallery? You've been assigned to go review the show. And it's like, he said, I just turn around and walk out. And it's like, oh God, I got to go back in there. I got to find something, So it was really cool to interview him as a reviewer, art writer, more so than an artist this time.
Yeah, that's a difficult position to be in. You know what would be phenomenal, since we can dream a little bit here, is if in the next phase, we talked about doing the bio videos,
right,
is having Dawn interview artists on video.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be phenomenal. So anybody out there listening that wants to sponsor that.
Exactly, yeah. We got to get Don some cash. Folding money, Because that would be, oh my God.
Yeah.
I was watching Henry Louis Gates' Finding Your Roots last night. It was on demand. And what's his name from Law and Order? Maloney. What the heck's his name? Oh, God. The actor.
Oh, you got me.
Yeah. It was amazing how much alike Don and this guy were. And their gestures and everything like that. Yeah. And it's like, so when you said that, it's like, yeah, he would definitely be great on video. He's very visual when he speaks.
Yeah.
So that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, not even, getting to see the artists, but getting to see their work more. I mean, the podcast is great to get to know people, right? There's no real better platform to just have a conversation, particularly when you don't have cameras rolling, as because you've done a lot of video production type stuff. Once you put a camera in front of somebody,
freeze,
things change a little bit. But just visually, that's the big component missing from the podcast, particularly when we're talking about visual artists, is we don't get to see their work, but we get to know them. But the video would be, the next evolution of this for sure, so we can really demonstrate what it is they do. Yeah.
And Don, by the way, we're almost, he's got a couple of projects he's got to get out of the way with, but we have one of the things I discovered about doing the podcast is something called a topical series. So yeah, I interview individuals. I try to get people from visual performing and literary arts. I've had success in each field, but it's top heavy, obviously, with the visual arts. But I also like the topical things, and one of the topical series that I came up with was the Van Gogh boat, and that's to talk to visual artists, especially about their struggles trying to make a living, through their art. And Don and I were talking quite a bit, and I finally convinced him, and he came up with a concept. It's going to be called Push-Pull, and it's going to be about the Swain legacy, because so much of that history's gone by the boards, and Don would be interviewing all of the Swaineys, all of the graduates of the Swain School for perpetuity. It would create a legacy in and of itself. And that's another thing, too, that, Don would be the first one. I would like to get a couple of other podcasters, because there's only so much I can do in a given week. I mean, it takes about 20 hours to chase down the artist, to contact them, then convince them to be on the show,
and then show up at
and then book them on the show, and then then we got to do the show, and then it's got to go through the editing, and so on and so forth. But I would really love to get a grant for additional podcasters to focus on the incredible legacy of this area. I mean, we're talking about visual arts, but in the performing arts, my passion right now is with the Cape Verdean community, who someone told me that it was the Cape Verdean community, the jazz musicians of New Bedford, who created what we know as modern day jazz. It was their influence that created what we know. I mean, and they were involved, with some of the finest groups in the country, in the world. Literary artists, we've only just scratched the surface with literary arts, and there's so many people that we could go and interview.
Yeah.
And it's the stuff of nightmares for me, because I want to make sure that we're running on all cylinders on this project.
Yeah.
Now, music-wise, I mean, because of your music interests, who would you like, living or dead, to hear about on the show?
Well, oh boy, that's a loaded question. From this area, obviously, we're restricting it geographically. You already got Quinn, so he was big.
Yeah.
And is gonna be big if people don't know about him. Quinn Sullivan, check him out. He's one of those. He's kind of a weird one. I wouldn't say he's on the upswing, because he was on the upswing when he was like 10.
10, yeah.
You know
Actually, he
what
was
I
on the
mean?
upswing since he was 5.
Right,
Like,
but he's gonna.
Yeah.
I think with this new
he
album,
hasn't broken
has
out,
coming
so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
gonna.
He was a
hit another-
phenom,
Yeah.
but he's now got to go to those other stages as he matures. Yeah.
A true prodigy.
Right.
I know people throw that term around a lot,
Right.
but yeah, he is. Who I thought would be interesting would be Craig DeMello.
Craig DeMello.
He's a local teacher, English teacher, so he's a writer. He's a musician, so he writes music. He performs music. He also does spoken word poetry and stuff like that. So he's a good mix of a kind of the literary realm, the music realm, but also, his experience in education. I think would be a great interview, because it covers those three areas. Musically, there's a lot, man. There's a lot. A lot of the people I know in music don't live around here anymore. Obviously, you can do that via Zoom and whatnot, but
And that was the good thing about the podcast, about the pandemic, was that it's like, ding, ding, hello, we can do this a different way.
Right, yeah.
Because, I mean, I've interviewed somebody, Matt Beal in Germany, and like in the continental U.S., I'm trying to think of who was the furthest away that I did. Well, Tennessee, Nashville was Johnny Gwynn.
You know who would be good for you? I'm sorry, I don't know his first name, but I went to high school with his son. Ethan Weiss. His father I don't know his first name, but I believe his company is Whaling City Sound. He has another
Oh,
business
so
too.
yeah, it's Neil Weiss.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has
His dad with fiber optics company.
Exactly.
Was one of my old clients.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he has the label. He's a jazz musician. His son's a musician too. But if you wanted to explore that jazz realm for this community, he would be a great person to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've brought this up several times on the podcast. Paul Gonsalves from this city, he prevented the Duke Ellington Orchestra from falling apart. And he is like legend. In the 1965 Newport Jazz Festival, he did a 35 chorus solo. I mean, it's like still like a record to this day. And then there's another thing too. Just in the music, I mean, there's so many subcategories. Just in music alone in this city, the number of Berkeley students and Berkeley faculty. It's almost like New Bedford's kept Berkeley alive. The Berkeley School of Music.
Yeah. Well, I think you had introduced me to a Berkeley grad who lives in Dartmouth.
Joe Carrier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another great artist from this area is Rebecca Correa. I don't know if
Yes,
you reached out
I've
to
been
her.
trying to get a hold of her as well. Yeah.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. She's got a tremendous voice, extremely talented.
Yeah.
I think she splits her time between up here and
I think she does goes in
Tennessee.
Is it Nashville?
or
Yeah.
something like that. I follow her on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
She's really, really talented. Of course, if you could get anybody from the old Tavares days, that would be great.
Well, I did reach out to Chubby. As you know, when I lived in New Bedford, I lived next door to the aunt of, Chubby's wife's sister. And so I, pretty much, saw the ebb and flow of family there. But yeah, living next door to somebody, and a super group shows up, is kind of heady, But yeah, that alone. And then in the performing arts, okay, I got to interview America's mentalist, John Stetson, who was the subject for The Mentalist, the television show.
Yeah. I haven't listened to that one yet, so.
And Lynn Dillies, America's foremost female illusionist, who made a donkey and an elephant appear out of thin air for a political rally, for a get out the vote rally. So, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
wow.
there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
You might need 25 more years.
25 more people. So, as we go along, the biggest conundrum still is the database. We've got to get that database squared away, where the three categories that we had. And I know, like, I kind of freak you out with those because, like, no, focus. Yeah. I am focusing. Sometimes you don't know the difference.
Every time you say database, I just turn away. I'm like,
yeah. So we've got one where it's basically a yellow pages for the artists, visual performing literary. They come in, they put in their work, they put in their bio, they can update it whenever they want. So they're there. Okay.
The key word here being they. So the challenge with this aspect is getting people to do so, because we know
corralling cats is
well, I mean, artists in general aren't the best self-promoters, and that's not a knock on them. It's just a personality thing, and I'm the same way. I'm not one to put myself out there all the time. Look at me. There are some artists who are entrepreneurial. You see they're doing a good job on social media. They got Instagram, they got YouTube. They're doing great stuff. And then, there are a lot of other people that's just not their thing. So when you reach out and say, hey, we're trying to create this database, submit this information, submit some of your work and artist statement, whatever it is, they're just like,
why?
No, thank you. I'm just going to put some music on Paint or, do whatever it is they do.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge. And then, of course, if we're talking about trying to capture information about people who have already passed away.
Right. That's the second category.
There's an inherent amount of time and effort that goes into that. So, that's hours, that's manpower, that's somebody that needs to do the research, write it up, put it together. So, that's obviously a challenge too. What's the third category?
There are loads of people that need to be put into that category. The third category is basically sort of like a swap meet. And what that is okay, you've collected all these tidbits of information. You've got recordings, you've got memorabilia, ephemera, so on and so forth, of these people that were creative people from this area. But you're looking for the following. So, as a researcher that sometimes when you find something, it's too good to throw away, too good, somebody needs this information. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you're putting it out there. Hey, I'm looking for information on, okay, I'll give you an example. I think I actually made contact with his daughter, and then, again, is to try to keep it up. My old private art instructor, Mal Oliveira, who had a studio on Arch Street in Dartmouth, in South Dartmouth, as they referred to it at the time. He worked at Concordia Yacht, and he taught me. I've got to say that from the objective standpoint of art and painting, he taught me everything I know. And he is the only guy that I could actually respectfully say that his work on velvet, because he did some work on velvet, was like knock your eyes out. It was like phenomenal.
Painting on velvet?
Painting on velvet, yeah. It was tasteful. It was well executed, the whole 9 yards. And yeah.
Makes you think,
it wasn't like Elvis
why would
or
somebody
Bullfighters.
want to paint on velvet?
Well, he did these still lifes, so strawberries and oranges and stuff.
Yeah.
And like he said, it just lent itself to some of these techniques.
Huh.
But again,
seems like it'd be awfully frustrating.
It was about touch. You can't go heavy on this because once you do it, you screw it. You've got to be very, very, very light-handed with this, and it's good training. Is basically what he did. But every time I do landscape, I remember some of the he said, look, don't let any of those art instructors in college tell you differently. There are tricks. It's all about tricks.
Yeah, well, tricks, or you can call it technique.
Yeah. Like when you look at a landscape, a well-executed landscape, if you really look carefully, the outer edges are fuzzed out because that's your field of vision. And like I look at the ocean. Every time I look at the ocean, I think of Mal Oliveira. Yeah. An angry sea, a dark sea has a light sky. A dark sky has a light sea. The horizon line where the sea and the sky meet is like this very, very thin, bright line that runs across. And I think of him constantly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's technique.
Yeah.
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 But
it's technique based on observation and experience.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which is, I think I've told you both my daughters that, they're so in love with everything arts and crafts. And so I try to do it with them as much as possible. And then they see some of the stuff I do and they're like, wow, how do you do that? And I'm like, I literally just scribble. It's just scribbling. But it's a technique you develop over time.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that I appreciate about meeting you was developing more of a respect for abstract art. And instead of looking at it like somebody just splashed a bunch of paint on this canvas, digging in and looking like, oh, I see the technique involved here to create these shapes and patterns and textures and gradients and whatnot. Yeah, and people don't, they don't realize it. But, there's skill, there's technique, and there's experience. And, technique is important. And that's what we learn through education, also experience.
Yeah,
but,
doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to do it. I mean, your daughter, Sophie, first of all, you're lucky that your daughters care or are interested in what you're doing. I hope that lasts because it's going to get to a point where, I forgot who said it was, when your kids are really annoying you, you tell them, you better leave now while you still can, because if you stay any longer, you're going to be as stupid as we are.
Yeah. Well, I've thought about that too. Is watching my kids take an interest in art. Both of them just love it. They doodle, they sketch, they do it on tablets, they paint. Even my oldest daughter is now getting into needlepoint. Whatever it is, they just love it. But when you watch kids, like all kids when they're young, they just gravitate towards anything creative, anything art-based, right? They all love it. Starting to color with crayons, coloring the lines, do this, whatever it is, finger painting, blah, 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 blah. They love it. And then at some point, people gravitate towards different things, but it seems almost like it's ingrained biologically in all of us, genetically somewhere, that we love these creative explorations of...
Right, until a well-meaning adult comes along and crushes our souls. Because I'm being really serious about that, because when I first started teaching at the community level for the old South Coast Learning Network, and it was my first class of adult learners, and I felt like, oh my God, I'm not a painting instructor any longer or a drawing instructor. I'm like some sort of a therapist, because these were like, I liken them to wounded birds. These are people who were or thought they were good, or really were enthralled or thrilled or happy with drawing and such, and some adult in their life came down on them and said, "Put that stuff away.
Yeah,
you can't fritter your life away doing that.
You can't
stuff.
make a living.
You got to get serious."
Yeah.
Or all those kinds of excuses or statements of that there was similar, and they came back. They took this adult learning class because they wanted to verify, they wanted to be validated that they were as good as they thought they were. That's sad.
Well, I mean, it's sad, but it's one way to think about it. I think there's multiple things. Like I said, I think it's somewhat ingrained in all of us, because when you watch kids, 0 to 4, they all gravitate towards it. But then eventually they move away. They get into sports, they get into other things, and that's fine. Everybody, gravitates towards something different. Certainly, a lot of people will push people away from that. That's great, but you got to focus on something that's going to get you a career, something that's going to make you money. So there's multiple reasons why people will move away from it. I wouldn't be so cynical about it as you are. I think
I'm cynical because these are the stories that I was told.
Well, I think one of the other ways to think about it is a better way that you can channel that energy into other realms of life, other careers, other endeavors. So taking that creative spirit, taking artistic training, and applying it to whatever you do in life. So that it's not that everybody should end up being somebody who paints on a canvas and hangs it in a gallery. There's lots of ways that people can channel that energy into creative means, like we do here through graphic design, logo design, website design, video production, but it can also be interior decorating. It can be, prints on fabric, It can be designing products. If engineers had their way, every product that we consume would be one way, because it would be the most functional, structural, cheapest, most efficient way to do it. But artists come along and say, yeah, what if we do it this way? What if we give a little curve here, a little embellishment here, maybe a little bevel here? You know what I mean? So, I certainly feel like a lot of creative people end up into professions in life that doesn't bring that part of them out. But if they learn to channel it in different ways, you can learn that the artistic training, the techniques, everything you learn doesn't necessarily mean you grow up to be an artist, somebody who is known as an artist, a recording artist or an actor or a painter, etc. There's lots of different ways you can express that in your life, and more so than just a profession. Whether or not you channel that energy into something that makes you money, you can channel it into ways in your life that help you navigate the rest of life. the way you look at things. Like you had mentioned before, observation. You know, one of the big things about artistic training is observation. So you may end up being somebody that gravitates more towards the scientific field, right? But what is the most fundamental piece of science in terms of empirical traditional science? Is theoretical stuff now, but traditionally it was observation, right? You make an observation, a hypothesis, you test it, blah 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 blah. So on down the line, I think artistic training is big for that. So I mean, you talked about as a teacher, and you teach certain lessons, and educators teach certain lessons. It's like, okay, we're gonna sit down here, we're gonna do a still life, we got this stuff on the table, we're gonna draw it. That's, you know, a very tactile thing. It's like you're restricting the person. How much are you allowing them to be creative or whatnot? But what you're teaching them is to settle down and observe. And whatever artistic experience or realm you take in life, whether it's visual, performing, culinary, literary, whether you're a stand-up comedian, the first thing is you got to learn how to observe, right? And that's what you do. And you can apply that to everything in your life. Yeah. Whether you end up becoming, a psychologist, a business person.
Marketing. You have to see trends and fads.
Right.
You know?
So it all starts with observation. So there's a tremendous amount you can learn from the artistic pursuits that doesn't necessarily ultimately lead to you being an artist per se, but bringing the artistic spirit to whatever it is you do.
I always said, because I spent a long time in my professional life in advertising and marketing, everything I needed to know about advertising and marketing, I learned in art school. Watching patterns. And Adrian Teo, who was a former dean of the College of Visual and Performing Arts at University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and is a printmaker, said it best. Said everybody says that artists are taught how to be problem solvers. And
creative problem solvers.
Yeah, and he said, that may be true, but more so is that they are trained to find and to see patterns, because the pattern is the ultimate thing.
As humans, we're all fundamentally trained to see patterns, and that manifests itself in different problems nowadays. But we're all trained to see patterns.
I mean, as dumb as it sounds, and probably not a really great example, the assassination of Osama bin Laden, that Navy SEAL. If he had just gone, by the training and just, got his target in sight, he probably would have failed. But he started to see a pattern of the waves, which worked for him, but it reminds me of a story about me. But anyway, it works for him because, he knew, like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then he knew when it was his moment. Yeah. And this story about me was when I thought I had counted the waves when I was trying to photograph those waves in Portugal. And I didn't know that the straps from my backpack were, like, in the water because I was crouched down. So I thought I had plenty of time. I was going to wait until that roller came, shoot and then run. And it was a rogue wave. It was out of pattern.
Out of sync. Yeah.
It was out of sync. Which ended me on my back, holding my cell phone in the air so I wouldn't get it wet. But it really is about noticing those patterns. Marketing, especially. I mean, COVID. I think I've been able to deal with COVID better by being I say a former marketer. I still can't shut my brain off to that. And then I know that when they make these pronouncements, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
It's flattening. You know what that means, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to spike.
Yeah, well, that's messaging, The government's not very good at messaging.
No.
So to speak.
Yeah, they're way, way, way off. So we co-founded this thing. I don't even know where we are in the 4 stages of business. The new and introductory, the growing. We're I guess maybe we're at the beginning of growing. We're definitely not at the maturity level yet because we need better quality. We need more quantity. We need to turn this into, I hate to use the term, a business. self-supporting business.
Yeah, I mean,
And one that is in perpetuity.
right. So that's the key. It's something that will live beyond you, live beyond me, and in multiple forms. Because 25 years from now, who knows how we're going to be transmitting data from one generation to the next? So a few years ago, we were going through our spring clean out of our garage. My wife had this box, and it was a bunch of random shit. One of those random pieces of shit was a floppy disk.
Jesus.
And I'm like, we can get rid of this box. She's like, oh, no, that's some stuff from college. Yada, yada. I'm like, you have a floppy disk here. Can we throw this away? No, that's got like my papers from college on it. And I'm
You
like,
don't even have a drive for that.
I'm like, do you own a machine where you can insert this floppy disk?
Yeah, was it a diskette or was it the 5-inch one? Or was it the little one?
The diskette. It was
Okay,
small.
the diskette. Okay, yeah.
I don't
the
think it was
floppy's the
5
big
inches.
ones. Yeah.
And so, how do we transmit that data? Now it's podcast, it's audio. This podcast here is going to live on multiple servers over multiple generations. It's the website and stuff like that. But how do we pass that all down?
I don't know. I bought an A drive, what they call an A drive, which was for the diskettes, because I figured, okay, I'm going to be kind of clever and I'm going to put my all of my passwords and that kind of stuff on that kind of media, because who in their right mind, would, if they were trying to like hack me or get my information, who in their right mind would even think of that? Well, I bought the A drive and I had the diskette, and you know what? The laptop that I have doesn't support that A drive. So you can put the diskette in there, but it's not going to go anywhere. Yeah. It's true. Yeah, I mean, look at the. It just broke this week, that creepy. Some people call it creepy. Some people call it phenomenal. I think it's through the Family History website, where you can take photographs of your ancestors and animate them in a loop of about a minute loop or something, where they're moving their heads around, their eyeballs, and they're looking around the room and everything like that and smiling. Who would have ever thought about that 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Yeah.
Even just colorization. I mean, you bring color to an old black and white photo, and it's a different story.
Yeah. There are some photos from the 50s that were colorized that people are uncoloring.
Yeah. We look better in black and white.
Yeah, look better in black and white. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, we're going to wind this down, Jeff. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I would just say, to all the people out there that are listening, we're open to whatever feedback, whatever criticism, whatever ideas people have, ways we can enhance this, do this better, bring to light some of the other things we talked about in terms of producing video and the profiles and all that stuff. So, we don't want it to be just this thing, you and I. We want it to be a community endeavor, so we can capture the legacy of all these artists, be able to tell their story as best we can, and in some way, shape, or form, be able to hand that down to future generations, whether it's in the form of a floppy disk or a CD-ROM drive or a MP3 file, or who knows.
Smoke signals.
We'll go back to pigeon carrier.
Yeah, exactly. So I asked this of a lot of the artists on the show. How would you like to be remembered?
How would I like to be remembered? As a kick-ass dad, and as a person who was kind to people.
Yeah, that you are. I can vouch for that. Well, folks, thanks so much for joining us again on another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the South Coast Artist Index and sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits, who make all of this possible. And until the next time, the next episode, stay safe, stay healthy, and be kind to each other. Thanks a lot. See you later. Bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.